from the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal. This is All Things with Kim Strassel.
Welcome to All Things with Kim Strassel. The Middle East is still coming to grips with the Israeli and U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites and how that may reconfigure the region. Central to that question will be Saudi Arabia, which is currently attempting to reform and revitalize itself domestically and assert its influence globally. Joining us this week is a woman who has unmatched knowledge of that region, having covered it for decades, Karen Elliott House, who has a new book coming out entitled The Man Who Would Be King, which is a study of the enigmatic crown prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, and the huge change he's bringing to that country. Karen, I read the book cover to cover. It's out next week. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It was fun to do. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I can tell you did. And your knowledge of that area is just really, really remarkable. I cannot advocate enough that people get this if they want a better understanding. A quick question on the news. You wrote a great piece for us in the Wall Street Journal this last week in the wake of the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, talking about not just the benefits of those strikes for Israeli security and U.S. deterrence, but also what they meant to other regional players like Saudi Arabia. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see that turning out?
Well, I think Saudi Arabia is if you will, silent winner in this. The Israelis, in essence, in the attack, put their survival on the line. The U.S. put its reputation on the line. And the Saudis were passive. They put, in my view, nothing on the line, but they win because a weakened Iran is certainly in their interest. I mean, they don't trust Iran despite their diplomatic relations, and they would be thrilled and are thrilled, I'm sure, to have if the nuclear capability is truly destroyed. But they don't want to have their fingerprints on it and thus be subject to any retaliation by Iran.
One of the reasons I couldn't put this book down is I was just so surprised by much of it. I knew from a 30,000-foot level that 6 or 7 years ago, the king of Saudi Arabia, King Salman, had installed a new crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, known by his initials over here as MBS, and that he was changing things. A lot of that, however, I think has been overshadowed by some controversy surrounding him, namely that infamous lockup of scores of royal princes in the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh, and questions, too, about his involvement in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. But what I did not understand was the depth of the internal transformation. And you've been visiting Saudi Arabia for 45 years now. You were there only recently. Tell us a little bit what a visitor would see in Saudi Arabia today versus just 10 years ago.
It is truly night and day. 10 years ago, the religious police were out on the street. These were guys in short thobes. They showed their ankles, and they had big beards and scarves over their head without the black ring around it, so you could tell who they were. And they basically went around with their sticks, and if any man or woman was doing anything that they regarded as improper, for instance, simply being together, they shook their stick at you and arrested you. I received one of those once for being in a Dunkin' Donuts in a big mall with my translator when I was writing my first book on Saudi Arabia, and they came up to me, and I wear a long abaya, but I don't cover my head. I keep the scarf around my neck. And the guy said to me in perfect English, "Cover your head, you're in Saudi Arabia." And then they took my passport, they took his identity card, they took him to the religious police headquarters. They gave me my passport and told me to go to my hotel, and I did. It was not a pleasant life for people. A single young man could not enter a mall because he might prey on women. I mean, there were rules and rules and rules. And I think now if you go, there are women walking all over in groups. There are women dining in restaurants in groups, and there are no longer segregated male and female sections in restaurants. You can sit anywhere you want. women are working, they crowd into elevators alongside men. And men used to be afraid to get in an elevator with a woman lest she make some accusation against him to the religious police. So there's just this mixing everywhere. You see young Saudi boys and girls, teenagers, sitting in Starbucks with their computers like American kids here. It's phenomenal. I went to a restaurant and when I was there in March, and they now have a wine menu. Even though alcohol is still not sold in Riyadh, except at a place where only embassy foreigners can enter to buy it. And that's in bulk, not by the drink. But the restaurant had a wine menu. It was non-alcoholic wine from Spain, but you could order a glass of non-alcoholic wine. Was taken by man in Saudi Arabia to they don't have bars, but they have coffee houses. And this particular coffee house was a gathering spot for gays, which of course not supposed to exist. And if they do, are not supposed to let anyone know they exist. So all around things have loosened up. So it's a vastly different place than when I went. I went the first time probably before you were born in 1978. And at that time, it was before the religious crackdown. So I went to a dinner party at the oil minister's house. It was full of men and women dressed unbelievably. Alcohol served, but all of that went away. All the mixing of men and women, alcohol. I mean, people had alcohol. How they imported it into the country, I don't know. But, many people served real wine and scotch and all of that stuff throughout the religious domination. But it was only in the privacy of your home. And I think that's the fact that there was no entertainment, no movies, no nothing, because the religious authorities viewed any kind of entertainment as distracting from focus on Allah. And I think the young crown prince, was one of those who grew up under all of that religious heavy hand. And as I said in the book, it wasn't just policy, it was personal to him to lift the heavy hand of religion. But it was also essential if he was going to reform the country. He needs foreign investment. He needs foreign expertise. And nobody is going to come there and live if their wife can't drive, can't work, can't go out without being harassed by the religious police. So he took them off the streets. He simply forbade them to be there. And that was wildly popular with people.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more with Karen Elliott House on her new book, The Man Who Would Be King. Welcome back. I'm Kim Strassel here with Karen Elliott House talking about Saudi Arabia. Let's talk a little bit about that transformation to the economy that he's trying to bring about too, because religion is one piece of this. And again, I really suggest readers get this book so that they can understand how he's pushed back those clerics, as you said, and is not only sort of changing the terms of the message of Islam in the country, but also essentially trying to get a younger generation to place more stock in Saudi Arabia as a nation rather than the longtime clerical view that it's religion that binds Saudis together. But he inherited not only this religious question, but this massive structural challenge in Saudi Arabia, including a country that, due to a long period of moribund leadership, it lacked a vision. It was essentially a giant welfare state financed by oil revenues. He's trying to change all that and make it more market oriented. Can you walk us through a little bit of that too?
Yeah, his view is that the country has to transform itself off of dependence on oil because there will be a time when oil revenues, particularly with the push for green energy, that there will be a time when oil revenues won't be sufficient to provide people the lifestyle to which they've become accustomed. So they're going to have to stop depending on the government and start depending on themselves. So the industries he's trying to build, one of them is tourism. That one obviously pushes change in the country because, again, tourists won't come. There are lots of great things, in my view, to see in Saudi Arabia, but tourists won't come if, again, they're going to be tormented the whole time they're there. So he is trying to say we are a nation state and build nationalism as the glue that holds people together. You are a proud Saudi. And young Saudis, I think, genuinely do admire him because he was basically 30 when he got this big responsibility. He's 39 now, and they see him as one of them. And after, as you said, 4 decades of half-dead elderly kings, he who didn't have a vision, and if they had, they didn't have time to execute it. So it was like, as I'm fond of saying, a silent movie. You just saw one old man after another, his lips moved, but nothing happened. And so people are ready for change, and they do see him as the leader. There are clearly exceptions to that. I lived with a very religious lady when I was writing my first book to see what real religion was like. And I visited her afterwards while I was working on this book. And I had been to a place called Hegra, which is like Nabatean ruins like Petra in Jordan. And she said, oh, I couldn't do that. That is cursed by God. So I could not visit there. So there are people that, are not fond of the changes, but he has largely intimidated people into approval or silence, as you said, arresting his royal relatives and putting them in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel and jailing some prominent clerics. Others have confessed that they had the wrong view of Islam. So he is making these changes, which are, I think, highly significant. If he truly can get this country off of the religious fanaticism, I think it will have an impact on religious fanaticism around the world. And the more so given what Israel has done in Iran. I think in the short run, they're going to be more fanatical, more determined to try to organize groups of terrorists to kill Americans, etc. But that over time, it will produce a more normal definition of what is a good Muslim. Then a good Muslim is somebody that kills a Christian or Jew and goes to heaven and gets virgins.
It will be really interesting to watch. One of the fascinating things you point out in this book is that a lot of the younger Saudis that are piling into, especially some of the more advanced jobs, are actually women because they trained to be teachers and in some ways are better educated than a lot of the men who went and got a degree in Islamic theology, which was the good thing you did for years. He is making some huge bets, though. And you note this, these giga projects that he is building, they all have various goals. Some is to turn Saudi Arabia into a tourism destination, some to try to wean itself off of oil with these renewable energy projects, some to provide Saudis fun, as you note. But this is a giant economic bet that also is a huge risk for the kingdom, correct?
Yes. One of the princes I've known for a couple of decades, I quote in the book saying, these better work out because we're spending the oil money and you can't do it all over again. It will have expired by the time we know whether these work or not. There are already clear problems on some of these projects, like the Line, this futuristic city that he envisioned, which would stretch from New York to Philadelphia and be as tall as the Empire State Building all the way and, house 9 million people. And now it's now down to, in essence, a couple of miles, not 100 miles. They can always try to build more later, but it's in considerable financial trouble. And I think that's one of his big goals in cozying up again with President Trump is to try to induce foreign investment into the kingdom. His Vision 2030 plan called for $100 billion by 2030, and they're getting nowhere near that. Indeed, the foreign investment is actually down from the years before all of these reforms began. So I think he does have considerable problems. He's going to have to, I think, be more assertive in his trying to reach his big goal of let's shift the Middle East to prosperity instead of it being paralyzed by Palestinian-Israeli disputes.
Let's talk about that a little bit, in that that's the domestic piece, but it's intertwined, obviously, with foreign policy. And for everything he's trying to do domestically, he's been just as ambitious globally. And then that has potential enormous ramifications for an 80-year relationship with the U.S. The Saudis remain unhappy with what they have viewed as both American slaps at times, like Joe Biden calling it a pariah state, and also what they view as occasional American inconstancy, failing to be there when Saudis feel like they need to be there. So this is a prince who's somewhat roiling global politics. He's made it clear he's going to pursue a Saudi Arabia first approach to power, and that he will work with whomever advances Saudi interests, be that Russia or China or the United States. So how concerning should that be to U.S. policymakers, and what should they be doing with this relationship at this moment?
I think the U.S. should be doing, in a way, what Trump is doing, trying to focus on how to enmesh Saudi Arabia to help with us, to help preserve what I regard as the global institutional rule of law system. Because, Trump himself seems to be at times trying to blow off the world order and create his own. But I think these countries, there are a number of them, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, India, Indonesia, that are middle powers with big ambitions. I think his ambitions exceed most everyone else in that group, with the exception of maybe India. But he wants to make an impact, and the impact he wants to make is recognizing Israel and creating this corridor from Asia through Saudi Arabia, Israel to the Mediterranean and Europe. And his northwest corner of Arabia up near Israel and Egypt and Jordan at the top of the Red Sea would be a new Silicon Valley, create jobs for young Saudis by meshing Saudi money and Israeli technology, luring Western tech companies. Because energy is cheap in Saudi Arabia, they would be a place in their minds where AI, which consumes a lot of energy, would be used widely. And, he's got very great visions, and he needs to be more active, I think, in trying to pull them off, not just plan them. He has been active. I don't mean to say he's doing nothing, but I think, in this war, for instance, they always share intelligence with Israel. He has condemned Israel for striking Iran. He has tried to keep his fingerprints off of anything in Iran. He wisely probably tries to play all countries or Saudi first, as he says he will do. But I think, he and we need to be a bit more aware that we can do things together that benefit each of us that he can't do with China, for instance. China buys his oil and thus his biggest trading partner because they're desperate for oil, but it's not a country that is interested in defending Saudi Arabia. And presumably he noticed how they did not defend Iran, their strategic partner, whatever that means. They have a strategic relationship, but it doesn't include helping each other, apparently.
We're going to take one more break. When we come back, more on Saudi Arabia.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel.
Welcome back. Many people, I think with good reason, believe that Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel was at least partly, if not wholly, engineered in order to derail normalization between the Saudis and the Israelis. And it has certainly done that, at least for now. MBS, as you note, has plenty of reasons to try to make that normalization nonetheless happen from an economic and peace perspective. But where does that sit now in the wake of the U.S. Israeli strikes on Iran? President Trump just this weekend teased out trying to revive the Abraham Accords, but the Saudis have long said that the demand is a two-state Palestinian solution as a condition of diplomatic relations with Israel. Is there a way through this?
I think there absolutely will be a way through it, but not in the short run. Because, I mean, I've heard, like you, Trump hinting we're going to have a ceasefire in Gaza and that he's going to get Netanyahu out of his court problems and, revive the Abraham Accords by somehow getting the Israeli prime minister to accept a two-state solution. I think if he does that, his right-wing government will abandon him. So I don't think he will do it in the short run. But I think because, as you noted, the Crown Prince has said we will pursue our long effort to get a two-state solution, and we will not recognize Israel without a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. I think that's about as likely as my swimming the Atlantic Ocean as a Texan who's afraid of water. But because the Crown Prince wants this economic development and peace to protect his big spending on all of these mega projects, I think he has a great motivation. And to be trite, where there's a will, there's a way. At some point, he will find a way to get off the Palestinian promise or to get something from Israel that at least promises. I think, again, he benefits because the Iranians have played the Palestinian card repeatedly because they hold it over the Arabs' heads that we are for a one-state solution. We're for wiping out Israel and giving the whole thing to the Palestinians. And you all just want a two-state solution. You're not really pro-Palestinian. So with Iran out there taking that we're going to destroy Israel line, it's been hard for any Arab to logically get past your sellouts and we're the real zealots. But I think it will ultimately happen. I mean, I started covering the Middle East in 1978, right after Sadat had been to Jerusalem. And everybody then thought peace would break out. So I'm a bit of a cynic that if you read the Bible, there's nothing in there that would make you believe there's going to be peace in the Middle East in my lifetime. But I think he really wants it because he's got another 50 years. He's 39. He could be in charge of Saudi Arabia, barring an act of God, for the next half century. So he has a huge motivation to want a peaceful country that's prosperous, where young people have jobs. They don't want to be terrorists. I mean, they're not afraid of Israel. Israel's never tried to destroy Saudi Arabia, but they need to get stability in Syria. They need Israel to help on that. They need stability in Iraq. They need less radicalism in Iran. So there's still a lot of tasks to do. And he could play a big role in all that, not just what he's done for the last 10 years, focusing on changing things at home, but changing things more in the region if he will put his mind to it.
Well, I am going to hope that we do indeed see peace in your lifetime and my lifetime. We will leave it on that optimistic note. Of course, one really interesting thing, and you end with this in the book, is will he actually be there for 50 years? The al-Assad family is quite complex. In fact, I admired you amazingly being able to keep track of that family tree. That was one of my challenges. I think you said these days it encompasses something like 15,000 males and females.
Yeah.
But but we will see what happens when his father dies. Karen, we thank you so much for coming in and sharing your knowledge with us today. We want to thank our listeners. If you like the show, you can hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to write to us, you can at atkim@wsj.com.